Welcome to New Release Review, part of the Movie Friends podcast. My name is Seth. Today we're talking about Godzilla Minus One from 2023, directed by Takashi Yamazaki. We will be discussing spoilers the whole way through, so if you haven't seen Godzilla Minus One, please turn this off, run to the theater and see it, and come back and listen. My guest today is Philip Marinello. He's the host of the Substance podcast, where they are engaging the culture without the culture war. And I've come to find he's a big Godzilla fan, which is helpful because I wouldn't say I'm not a big Godzilla fan, but I'm definitely not versed in the language of the Zilla. So
it's a commitment. It's a very large field.
Yes. I mean, literally spanning decades, and I don't even know how many entries. But anyway, Philip, welcome.
Thank you, Seth. It's always nice to me in this world that we live in now, the digital world. It is always fun to connect with movie folks online, share connections, then a lot of times end up doing podcasts together and getting to meet each other that way. It's a blast.
Yeah.
I love it.
I always say social media is great if you use it correctly. You know what I mean?
100%.
You and I would probably never cross paths without it. So
I mean, you're a New York guy, and I've not made it out there yet. I have a lot of family up there, but I've not made it out yet.
So just kind of initial thoughts. I mean, this movie is doing really well in terms of like critical response and fan response. It's doing well at the box office.
The box office is amazing.
Yeah, for its budget and everything. But what did you think about this movie?
On the Godzilla fandom thing especially. So I have been, obviously we're all culturally aware of Godzilla as the thing. And I saw the 99 movie when it came out. That is now very much maligned. Yeah. I loved it at the time, but then I think when the Criterion Blu-ray came out, I saw the original, and then I didn't really get into it until I think 2018 in the lead up to Godzilla King of the Monsters of the new legendary American franchise. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get into this. And I watched a bunch of the big ones, and I was like, these kind of rule.
Yeah.
And then I went through a ton of them. I still haven't seen them all. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the 37th film and the 34th or the 33rd Toho one.
Okay.
So, you've got the four. Kong Skull Island, I guess, is not really Godzilla. So there's the 14, King of the Monsters, and Godzilla versus Kong. So I think it's 37 and 34. So 37 total, 34 Japanese. And I've seen most of them. I think there's about 7 or 8 that I haven't seen. And I've only done that. So I'm not like a lifelong Godzilla fan. The fandom is so deep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They have Godzilla conventions, many of them every year. So there are people who can run laps around me when it comes to Godzilla trivia. But for the average movie fan who's only somewhat aware, I'm a big Godzilla fan. I've seen a ton of them. I love many of them.
Yeah, I'm in a film club, and the host and one of the other members are like lifelong Godzilla fans. They have various...
I wish I would have been. I would have loved these as a kid.
Yeah. When we get into talking about it, they can just go and go and go. And it's something, as a lover of, film and hobbies, it's something that's very impressive to me that I'm very much on the outside of.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I've got my foot in the door, but when I say I'm a Godzilla fan and lifelong fans light up, I'm like, I can only go so. But I do know a lot of the names because I got into it as an adult.
Right.
And I did it on purpose. I'm like, I would like to get into it. And then I ended up really liking it. So Godzilla Minus One was super amped. I didn't get to see Shin Godzilla in the theater because it was playing so briefly.
Yeah.
And it was playing around the time of one of my moves. So I didn't really get to see it. And I remember briefly considering, but because I wasn't a big fan, when Godzilla 2000 came out, I remember briefly considering going to see it with either my family or some friends, but it wasn't like an urgent thing. So this was my first Toho Japanese Godzilla movie in a theater.
Same.
So, that had me very heightened. I saw the American ones, and No, I didn't. My local theater's got a relationship with the Criterion Collection, and they sometimes will play some of the older ones.
Wow, awesome.
And I was going to go see a couple, but I didn't make it. So yeah, this is my first, not just my first new one, this is my first Japanese Godzilla movie period in a theater. Wow. And it was incredible.
I think for people who aren't very into Godzilla, this is a great starting point because it's, and I don't want to use this word in necessarily a positive way, but it's somewhat of like a soft reboot. You know what I mean? We're kind of
Well, I'll
starting
tell you
from
this. I don't know
nothing.
how many of the movies you've seen. One of the nice things about the Godzilla movies in general is that there are groups of films that are kind of like a comic book story arc where there's like these three kind of go together. But so you can't truly say every movie is a great starting point, but most of them are kind of their own thing,
Mm,
generally connected.
yeah.
Like they kind of did like the Monster Avengers with like the early Showa films where there was Godzilla, there was Mothra, there was Rodan, and then they all banded up together to fight Ghidorah. And then there was Destroy All Monsters, which was like all the monsters
Yeah.
fighting together. But I mean, in general, many of the movies are kind of their own thing, which is nice.
Yeah.
But this one truly goes back to like, it is kind of like a reset. Like they're going back to World War II. This is truly like a ground zero.
Right. Right. And again, as we said, we're talking about spoilers. We end with definitely setting up, something else coming. I don't know what.
I felt both ways about that, and I love the film. Like I'll be upfront. I thought it was incredible.
Same. Yeah.
The two little bits at the end, it's nice because they could make more. This could be the start of a new series,
Yep.
or they could just be fun little teasers at the end. Like I don't like a movie that is like this movie exists to start a franchise. Like this was very much its own thing. But it is also nice that it is already massively successful. So if they have good ideas, that they can keep these up.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? It didn't feel like necessarily, oh, there's going to be a sequel. It felt like at the end of, very rarely does this happen, but it's so much fun when it does, when you get the card, the end, and then slowly a question mark appears. And it's just cool. I just felt it's just like a little bit of like a one last like pump of energy to be like, oh wow, he could come back. And if they make a sequel or if they don't, I think wouldn't add or take away from this film, which I think is pretty darn near perfect for an action movie.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And I love many of the Godzilla films. I had heard, because I got to go see it, I think Sunday night. So they had early previews starting Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. All of my Godzilla friends who are on Letterboxd, and just in general, I saw all the reviews come in, ton of 4+, and I was like, okay, I'm excited, but I don't want to get my hopes up. And I'm usually very generous, but I don't think I've given a ton of 5-star movies this year, and this one is the first time 5-star.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not quite sure where I'm at. I am not generous. I give very few 5 stars. Like I think I might have like 3,500 films logged, and I have maybe like 75 5 stars. I got a lot more 4.5 stars, but I am somewhere between that, 4.5 and 5 for this movie. It's just, it's amazing. I was not expecting the absolute thrill of seeing the Toho logo on a theater screen.
That was a delight.
And I saw it with my friend who, he's very much into movies, but he didn't recognize the logo. And he turned to me kind of jokingly and said, "Oh, I wonder what that says." And I turned to him and I started explaining.
Okay.
And he was
so have you seen many of the past ones? How many, like, not give me a number, but have you seen a few of them?
I've probably seen 4 to 5, not including the 1954.
Okay. Do you have any favorites, any tops?
Not, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm not really into those ones. They're fine, but it's nothing that I'm like, oh, okay. I really want to seek more of these out. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And
I mean, the big one that blew the doors open for me was GMK. That's what a lot of fans will say is that's often in the top favorites because that's got like the largest title ever. Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, giant monsters all out attack. But GMK, that one's great. For me, Godzilla versus Biollante is one of my absolute favorites. And I think one of the best. So we talked about this offline, you and I. One of the things that I love about Godzilla as a series is its ability to both deal with a brand substantive topics, but also just be so fun.
Yeah.
The original movie and some of the others are just like very, and this one too, very much can be very somber meditations on like humanity and grief and war and violence and destruction. But then you have some entries that are purely like monster WWE.
Yep.
And it's just giant monsters fighting.
Yep.
And I love the ones that really strike a balance. This did not have a balance. I thought it was incredible, but some of the ones that are like, and I think Godzilla versus Biollante is my favorite. That one or Mothra versus Godzilla. Those are the two that I would really recommend. The 64 Mothra versus Godzilla or Godzilla versus Biollante. Those both have really thoughtful, social, relational, economical, interpersonal stories going on, also with awesome monster fights.
Right.
But this one, yeah, I was not I didn't know. So we're doing spoilers, right?
Absolutely.
I was so glad I went into this blind. I had no idea that we'd be following a cowardly kamikaze pilot, like a deserting kamikaze pilot. Like, I'm so glad that I didn't know that. But that's what a brilliant just choice narratively. I was kind of blown away once I realized, oh, like this movie's going to be like very serious.
I kept waiting, my first time. I was able to see this twice in theaters, and I don't often rewatch movies. I don't often rewatch movies in theaters, but I was like, I got to see this again, especially hearing that it might have a very limited window. I mean, we're recording this on December 6th. They're saying it might be out by tomorrow, which is
so they did extend it, I think, 1 week, but I'm like, why would you only extend it 1 week? Maybe take it off IMAX if other stuff is coming. Right. But it was so thrilling to see in the theater.
Yeah. I'm also not a, hey, you have to see this in theater. You have to see this at like the highest, resolution and frame rate. All that stuff means nothing to me. If I can't watch a movie on a crappy TV and it doesn't grip me, I think you've lost me at least. This movie, I think you could watch anywhere.
I both am with you in that, but I'm also very pro big screen dark room. Is
definitely.
Way, if you're able.
I try to see as many films as possible in theaters, but
okay, same. Well, and not even just spectacle, but there is something special about a spectacle movie on a giant.
Yeah,
screen.
definitely. And so every movie, When Nolan put out Tenet, he was like asking everyone to risk their lives because it had to be seen.
That was my first pandemic movie.
Yeah, he was like, it has to be seen.
Disappointed if I'm honest.
Yeah, and I went to see it, and I was like, oh, this doesn't have to be seen on a huge screen. You lied to me, Nolan. But every big,
also kind of incomprehensible. Like, I get it.
Yeah,
that's like 1 or 2 away from the bottom of my Nolan rankings.
I agree. I think Inception would be at the bottom of mine, but anyway.
Nice. I don't hate Inception that much, but I'm very mid on Inception. Yeah. A lot of the Nolan bros don't like my take. Yeah. I think it's fine. It's very good.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Well, you know what? Nolan could learn something from Godzilla Minus One, because this film is reportedly made for $15 million.
Ooh, so nice.
It looks great. There were maybe 2 shots where I was like, okay, that looks a little wonky. There's one shot when we're coming up out of the water surrounding a boat.
Water, yeah.
For the most part, though, the water looks good. And then there was one shot when they're destroying the town that I was like, but I'm not going to complain about that at all, because
I caught that water scene as well. But for me, also, one of the things that I think is very endearing, I love the old like suitmation, miniature sets. Like, I love not feeling cheap, but feeling like tactile and real. I'd much rather have that than digital wonkiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Eventually, when you know that what you're looking at isn't real, you don't focus on anything, and it's just kind of passing before your eyes. Where when you look at a miniature, you can actually look at something.
Yes, like in a real suit. Yeah. And having said that, I'm not equally, but I'm also really pumped for Godzilla and Kong, The New Empire. Like, that looks dumb, but it looks like a lot of fun. But this was an incredible film.
Yes.
While also being, the destruction scenes were gnarly. Like, this was a mean Godzilla. Godzilla is sometimes this mean, but not usually this mean. This was a top 5, 10 percentile, like mean, bad Godzilla.
Yes. And that's another thing that I really enjoyed about this versus the Legendary series. I think that those movies are fine, and I don't fault anyone for enjoying them, but there's just so much lore, so much mythology. The relationship between Godzilla is, it's so mystical and ill-defined. And in this one, Godzilla is almost pure evil. And since we're dealing with war, I like that Godzilla is not complicated. He is bad.
No.
He is destructive. He doesn't care about you. He's unstoppable. And that we come to a disarmed Japan, right? And it's the people who have to disarm war without the use of weapons. What a statement. What an incredible, just an incredible, and you feel, Doc's speech about how their lives had been treated cheaply and how this was going to be a mission.
That was incredible.
Oh, I think it might be.
That was the substance. If we ever did a show on it, that's the part that I would clip. I mean, it would maybe have to be a dubbed version.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, that's what I love about Godzilla, that you can have the awe-inspiring and the terrifying, this angry, apathetic force of nature can wipe you and your home and your civilization off the map if it so chooses. Yep. But is also dealing with stuff Godzilla is a Japanese franchise. It talked about a lot of things in the original and then in some of those show movies as well. Critiquing culture was part of it. And that's another thing I love. We talk about this on The Substance a lot. Genre film especially is really powerful to do these things without being obnoxious about. They can be some quote unquote satire is really obvious and bad, but this was a thrilling monster movie that also grappled with how countries treat their people during times of war.
Yep.
And I wasn't expecting that necessarily going into it either.
I think that you have to, in order to get a lot of the meat of what is being given in genre film, you have to kind of approach them humbly. You have to kind of approach them with a, I'm putting myself into your hands and I'm not going to be so critical of everything in order to access what they're trying to say. Every time in this movie, when they say Godzilla or, oh, is that Godzilla? Or this is Godzilla. He's this. It's almost like when you watch professional dirt bike, extreme sports, when they go off the ramp and then they're in the air for 2 seconds and then they land and you're kind of waiting for them to land to make sure that everything's okay. That's what all the mentions of Godzilla are in this, where it's we're really walking a very thin tightrope here. There's the fantastic scene where the main character, and I'm going to absolutely destroy these names and I really apologize, but Koichi is talking to Noriko and he says, he's telling his whole story, his whole backstory, and he says, there was a monster that came ashore. And she doesn't immediately go wait, what? What are you talking about? And
yeah.
And we would, in the real world, we would expect that to happen. That's what we would do. But that's not what this is. This is a genre film. And the people who exist in this world exist in this world. So it's great.
And it's
great.
A bit of a, the lore isn't super forward in many of the movies. It is in some, actually. But it is kind of just generally understood post the first one. Well, even in the first one, you saw the islanders there with the bell. Godzilla was like a myth and a legend that was exacerbated. And much like this one, I actually wanted to rewind and get your thoughts on this. So in the opening scene, which I also wasn't expecting to see gnarly Godzilla action immediately.
Yeah.
When Godzilla was terrorizing the island, where Koichi pretended to have his plane be faulty so that he didn't have to do his kamikaze mission, when he was there and the first iteration of Godzilla attacked What was your read? I've seen different people say different things. Was your understanding that if Koichi got to his plane and shot it with whatever caliber of gun he had on his airplane, that it would have been effective in any way to harm or
Oh,
stop Godzilla?
no, absolutely not. No way.
I agree.
Yeah.
I saw some people saying he could have just ended it right at the beginning scene if he had courage, and I was like, Godzilla wasn't affected by the atomic bomb yet in that first scene, but he was still like this mammoth creature that I
Yeah.
don't think, I mean, it maybe would have done a teeny bit of damage
Yeah.
if he hit him in the face, but like, I didn't think he was going to do any real
No, I
damage.
think if we look at the themes of the film, what is it that causes all of them to die? Is it Godzilla appearing? No, it's them shooting at Godzilla and him retaliating. And
That is
this
true.
Godzilla can only be destroyed from the inside out. It has to blow up inside. We can't attack it. We can't attack war the way that we've been attacking war. And I think that that's part of the themes of the film. So,
Well, in war is what I mean, at the beginning, the shooting at him is what precipitated all but 2 people getting wiped out. And then the dropping of the bomb, which is what OP'd Godzilla to make him like give Godzilla his atomic power.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's definitely, you know, we have to think about this. We have to use our intelligence, not just our might. And if you look at Japan, I mean, it's amazing. Amazing when we look at, you know, Tokyo. And this is nothing like any Tokyo that we have seen before. It is little homes that have all been destroyed to rubble. And all I could think about was, you know, in one person's lifetime, where Japan, which has been disarmed, where they were able to take their country from World War II to today, and like the technological advances, the cultural advances that they've been able to make, which I'm not saying that it's like a utopia or if it's a perfect place, but they really set their minds after World War II to everything other than war. And it helps pull them out of, you know, being a bombed out country. And it's amazing. It's really amazing.
Yeah, no, and I forget geographically. I think the idea was these were all the surrounding islands and areas, and they were trying to stop him before Godzilla could get to Tokyo. Mm-hmm. But I mean, yeah, seeing those villages modernized, but also in the past, like I really did appreciate that. You got a sense of what it would be to live with our 2 main characters. You got a sense of what it would be like to live in an area that had been decimated by war.
Yeah.
You talked about the nonviolence kind of aspect of it, like using our minds and brains. Generally, like the good anti-war war movies kind of preach nonviolence and value human life, but this movie was very explicitly life affirming so many times. Like this movie really did everything. Like I was brought to tears. I'm a easy movie crier.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was not expecting this movie to be so emotionally powerful. Again, because we are following a kamikaze pilot who decided that he didn't want to do that. And that's an interesting moral question too, right? Like he was a deserter. He was a part of the military and refused to follow orders, but also his orders were to kill himself. Yeah. And like, what's the morality of that? Right. Like all these kind of conundrums together. Yeah. And then him in the aftermath dealing with that. And we haven't even talked about the relationships, like the whole found family aspect of the movie with Noriko and Akiko, like just finding each other and like having a family and dealing with his insecurities and fears around that when all of his work buddies are like, oh, like this is your wife and kid. He's like, no, we're not married. This isn't our kid. Yep. Like we just found each other after the war. She found this kid and then they found me and now we're a family. Yep. That was really touching stuff. Yep. And him trying to get over all of his stuff to accept love, that like his life had any value. Yep. As humans, we are relational creatures, and like to be wanted, like the mutuality of a relationship of like wanting to be wanted and wanting to help. Like he selfishly maybe didn't want to help, but then he's like, no, like this is a destitute woman and child. I'm not going to like put them out. I don't have a lot, but I guess you can crash here. Yep. Which just turned into, as more things got stable, it's like, well, they're still here and I guess we're a family now.
Yep. And even the neighbor, you know, Sumiko, who at first blames him for the death of her children through her compassion for this small child.
Well, she's a little bit more old school, right? She's like, hey, wait a minute. Like, why are you alive? You were in the kamikaze program. Like, she was shaming him for not killing himself for the greater good.
Yeah.
Like, that's gnarly.
Yep. But through, forgiving him, helping this new family, she then she raises this child. And of course, it's not a replacement for her children that she lost, but she still finds something. Like, everyone finds something. When we first meet Noriko, she's like a beggar. She's just doing what she can to get by. And then she ends up starting her own career. And it's this movie. This movie
it's
rules.
An incredibly touching human drama wrapped up
this movie
in a kaiju destruction.
Yeah, and that is, I think, some of the best genre films are just great stories that happen to be you know what I mean? It happens to be a horror film, but what is it actually doing? And what this movie is actually doing, it's great. So I kept waiting for a time jump. Like when we see the little baby, I think, oh, okay, maybe we'll jump forward in time and she'll be grown up, and then it wasn't until they started actually like dismantling the mines in the water. I was like, oh wait, this is the main character. Because I am not a fan of watching trailers. Once I know that I'm going to see a film, I avoid everything about it because
I'm with you. My thing is I usually will, if it's a big movie, I will usually check out. I don't always finish them, but I'll usually take a look at like the first teaser, but like a full trailer, I don't usually even watch if I can help it.
No, I don't trust trailers. I also have like a somewhat photographic memory for films. And so
I hate you're waiting for that one scene or set piece. You're like, we haven't seen that yet. How's that going to fit into
when
this?
you see the main character is all bloodied up and being dragged down a hallway, the whole movie, you're like, well, I know this is coming. So yeah.
Distribution companies, like, have somebody cut your trailers. Like the old trailers back in the day, they would really give you the vibe of a movie without giving away everything. We really need to go back to that.
I think directors should cut their own trailers. And like, what would you?
I'm a fan of just like title cards, narration, maybe just ambience, and
you know what though?
Show us a couple of images.
I think you and we're more into movies. We're more into like the culture. For people who aren't, and maybe who can't name, like a director or an actor, they see that and they get excited. When I hear this director is working with this actor, I go, oh, I'll see it.
Like, yes.
I'm done. I don't need to see it anymore.
My excitement level is probably higher than if you show me like a climactic scene in the movie, because out of context, that's kind of empty and kind of a bummer.
So I understand why they are. And I'm, I should consider my own position of being too steeped in film.
No, I'm with you on that. And I mean, I did get hyped seeing the teaser, the beginning of his atomic breath, how the scales popped out. That was a nice touch. I mean, that might have been cooler to have not known it was coming, but it didn't diminish that in the theater, seeing that image before I went to see the movie.
Right. So going into it with just no knowledge of anything, as soon as I realized like what a uniquely Japanese theme and idea to tell a story about World War II from the perspective of a kamikaze pilot. And I would be curious to find how many films we have that are told from that perspective, because he lives. He's not supposed to live, and he lives, right? And so all of the guilt that he feels, and while that is, uniquely Japanese, the guilt of inaction is a theme that is played out through many, many war movies. And it's something that I think a lot of people can relate to, of if I had done what I was supposed to do, X, Y, and Z wouldn't have happened. And the only part that made me cry was when he, finally says like, my war isn't over yet. And then at the end
in the cockpit before
when he's talking to Noriko, he says, she's like, why can't you? And he's like, for me, like the war isn't over.
A wrenching, like, if sadly, this probably won't get a whole lot of awards in the West. I mean, Godzilla movies will a lot of times win awards overseas, but there was some seriously incredible performances, incredible set design. That one conversation. I mean, this has been a great year for film, and there's still plenty that I haven't seen yet. But I mean, that scene I feel like would be high up there in
Yeah.
like best scenes of the year.
Look, I'm not a big fan of, in December of 2023 to say these are the 10 best movies of the year is absolutely absurd.
Wait
Talk
5 years.
to me, right? Exactly. Because there's just too many
There's
films.
still several. I was talking with another show earlier this week, and I was like, yeah, I know what I love this year, but I've got like 5 or 6 huge ones that I know I'll love that I haven't even seen yet. And I don't know when I'm going to have the time or the ability to. And I know that I'm going to love them. They'll probably be very high on my list, but just haven't got to yet.
Yeah, but this one, I had a huge smile on my face the second time watching it because all I could think was, who would have predicted at the beginning of this year, looking at the slate of films, we have a film from Scorsese coming out. We have Wim Wenders coming out with a new film in 2023.
You got Fincher, Anderson,
like 5 right? Exactly. 4. No one had Godzilla Minus One on their predictions for one of the best films of the year, and here it comes, $15 million budget, super limited release, and easily
it's going to be on my list for
sure.
Oh
yeah, easily one of my favorite movies that I've seen this year. And I truly believe this, no hyperbole, a very high watermark for action films just in general.
Well, that's like a whole nother discussion. We can talk briefly on that. Other than John Wick, really, I feel like it's like straight to video Scott Adkins or Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
And like action movies are in a big lull right now. There's not a whole lot of love.
Yeah, it's
or dollars or I don't know what. Like they make them. Like Expendables 4 came out and I was excited for that because like, oh, we listened. This one's rated R and it's going to be better. But like less than 2 or 3 days it was out, all the reviews I saw were like in the 2 to 3 star range.
It made a real
looked like trash.
Made a real water droplet at the box office. It just kind of came and went. And it's funny because when John Wick came out, it was the answer to all of the humdrum action films that had been coming out, and it was something that got people excited. And I feel like the next thing was Mad Max Fury Road, where it came on and it was just, wow, is this the greatest movie that I've ever seen?
I did watch the Furiosa trailer a couple times, but I'm like, I'm done now. I'm just going to wait.
And now, we have, and not to take away from, the John Wick series, and there certainly have been a few in between, but again, sitting there watching this movie, I thought to myself, oh, this is the best big action film that I've seen since Mad Max Fury Road. And I had the same feeling of, I'm taking this seriously, but it's a lot of fun. And that's another thing that I really like about this movie. This movie, I think, is serious as a heart attack. There are funny moments in it, but
that's what we've been saying. This movie is about like a cowardly kamikaze pilot struggling with survivor's guilt and like the Japanese people dealing with like a legacy of not valuing the lives of their people, not engaging in war in an ethical or a smart way. And like war sucks in general. Like it's not like, oh, but like they called it out, especially the Japanese people who made this specifically wanted to highlight their own history of their like supplies for like food and medicine, like the kamikaze things, like this and that. Like these were all the things where like Japan failed to take care of themselves. And we want to do better. And
those lines, I think you could say, oh, that feels a little out of place. But if you're saying something, I appreciate that they're giving us those facts. And I also appreciate the character of the kid who says like, oh, I just wish the war had continued. I wish that I could be there. He wants to be involved. And the people who've been through it are like, no, like the whole point of us doing this is so that you didn't have to be involved.
That was so serious where like he grabbed me. He's like, don't you dare say that. Like he goes, oh, like the idea of like war being like a glorious thing for like a young idealistic guy. He goes like, I would have loved to have fought for my country. And the guy's like, you don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the war should not have gone on like for another second. And then one of the lines that got me, I didn't quite cry, but it really got me, was when they were getting ready to enact the plan, and they were basically saying, hey, like, we are protecting you from this. Like, you didn't get involved in the war. You're not a veteran. Like, you don't know like the military stuff, because basically like the ex-Navy people executed the final plan, like with all their ships. And they're like, we're going to let you sit this one out. And it was something to the effect of like, there's like a glory or a benefit in like having not been to war. Like, that is a virtue as well.
Yeah. And when he says, we leave the future to you,
man, and get all like, the violence and the virtue, like war can be very packaged and sold to people in what it is not. And I really enjoyed how this film kind of took shots at that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have one question for you before we wrap up. Noriko survives. That might be
She does. My one gripe.
I'm not saying, I wish that she had died. It just...
That's a crappy way to say it. I wish that the choice to have killed her, they would have stood behind that, because that was a powerful scene. So you've got Koichi with his survivor's guilt going to save her. Like, okay, you got Koichi with his survivor's guilt. She continually is trying to encourage him and to let him know that like he has value. So he goes to save her in the city where she, like you said, she started her career. She's getting her life on track, and her final act to be to save his life, to try to like let him know that like his life has value and to carry on. And that was an incredibly powerful moment where seemingly she sacrifices her own life to protect him, because she's found peace. He doesn't have peace. She's found her peace. So her, from a position of peace, is standing in the way of guys, like pushing him out of the way and taking the damage herself, hopefully for him to find himself and to find peace, so that he can actually have like, she was at a place where if her life was over in that point, she was in a good place. So, but then to kind of backstep that, be like, oh, she's alive, and like happy ending, like they're all together. So like they're a family again.
Did you notice the black stuff on her neck? What did you make of that?
I made nothing other than, like, is this a thread for a future thing?
Yeah.
Cause like she'd clearly been recovering in that hospital for some time, and I have no idea. Like, these movies are very mystical. Like, there's fairies and like basically like, have you seen Godzilla King of the Monsters, the legendary one? So like, you know how Mothra at the end like superpowered Godzilla to give him the energy back, like stuff like that is not uncommon, especially in the Japanese movies. So I was like, is this some sort of like, is she real? Is this some sort of evil thing? Or like, I didn't go down the path of what is this? I'm like, oh, this is a thread that if they want to, they can pull on it in future things. Like, it kind of made me, at first I was like, ooh, what's that? And then it kind of made me roll my eyes. It's like, well, that's nothing. That can be whatever the next writer wants it to be in the next one, if they do.
And, you know, talking about good ideas, and this one is so solemn, it's so serious and specific to Japanese history. This movie is dealing with war, right? It's possible if they do a sequel, you know, they have the option of going down the path of nuclear fallout and dealing with that.
I mean, I would be more interested if she was evil. Like, if this was some sort of like, to bring her back, there was like a bad thing. But I did just go like, when they got the telegram, it's like, oh, she's alive. I was like, that's the only thing in the whole movie that kind of made me go, okay, this is the movie doing what the movie feels like needs to happen. Because up until that point, everything was just like, wow, this is so impressive and surprising and like grounded, even though it's a Godzilla movie. But in that moment, I was like, all right, this is movie doing movie. It's like, that's
fine. Philip, where can people find you?
People can find me podcasting over at The Substance. Like you said, we're on all the major platforms. Just type in The Substance. And we are on social media at The Substance Pod. You can find us there. We've got a library of over 140 episodes of... We do a lot of films under our Substantive Cinema banner, but we truly try to have a variety show of faith, arts, culture. We've got all sorts of guests from various disciplines, and it's a fun time. We've been doing it for a while, and really, really proud of the work we've done there.
Awesome. Very cool.
We actually did cover the original Godzilla movie. I forgot about that.
Awesome.
In the lead up to Godzilla vs. Kong, I think we had the host of the now shut down Kaiju Apostle podcast join us to talk about the F-54 one.
Very cool. Hey, so if you enjoyed listening to this, be sure to check out the show and find that Godzilla episode. Well, Philip, thank you again. It was kind of a balancing act, making the schedules work, and you're here very graciously through an illness. So I thank you. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any thoughts on Godzilla Minus One, be sure to send us an email, moviefriendspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought. We would love to hear from you. And, I don't know. That's about it. I'm not really good at ending episodes ever. It's usually what my co-host is for, but she's not here.
Well, Seth, I appreciate it. I genuinely enjoy your show, and it was good to talk Godzilla with you.
Yeah, very good to finally connect. All right, thank you very much for listening. Have a good one.
Movie Friends is produced by Seth Vargas and Michelle Rubenstein. Music by Anthony Vicora. If you like the show, please subscribe and give us a rating. It really helps us find new friends. Thanks!